All right, so today we're diving into a really heavy case, one that shook Australia to its core, the Anita Cobby murder back in 1986.
Yeah, this one stayed with Australia for a long time.
Definitely. And, we've got a ton of material on this to go through. The story itself, how the public reacted, and how it changed things in Australia. Like how this one crime, this horrific act, had these ripple effects, changing laws, changing opinions, everything.
It really did become this sort of touchstone case, a case people always come back to when they talk about violence, justice, even the media, and how all these things work or don't work in Australia.
It's true. And it's still relevant, even all these years later.
Oh, absolutely.
So, okay, we'll cover all the basics, of course. Who Anita was, what happened that night, the investigation, how the trial went down.
Right.
But we're also going to look deeper into the aftermath, right? How things changed legally, how it impacted society, and the incredible work Anita's family did afterwards.
They were amazing, really. Turned their grief into something powerful.
Yeah, they really did. Oh, and another thing, we'll get into this more later, but the perpetrators, the guys who did this, they were caught super fast, like unbelievably fast.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes this case so interesting.
And it's all because of this random tip, but we'll get to that.
It really shows how these tiny details, things you might not even think about, can be what breaks a case wide open, especially one that was as high profile as this. Everyone was watching.
Okay, so let's start with Anita. So she was 26 years old, living in Blacktown, New South Wales.
Right.
Now, a lot of people focus on her being a former beauty queen. And yeah, she was. But she was also so much more than that. I mean, she was a nurse, really dedicated to her job. And she was loved by her family, her friends, her whole community. She was just, a normal young woman. And that's part of what makes this so horrific, so gut-wrenching. Could have been anyone.
Absolutely. It's that ordinariness. That's what made this resonate with so many Australians. It was like, this could be my daughter, my sister, my friend. It just fueled this incredible outpouring of grief and anger.
Yeah, you can see that in the sources.
Yeah.
So February 2nd, 1986, this is the night it all happened. Anita was coming home from work. She'd taken the train, and she was walking from the station.
Right.
And that's when she was abducted. Her body was found later that night. Now, we don't have to go into the specifics here, but the details of the crime, they were brutal, absolutely shocking. And that really plays into the massive reaction this got.
It went beyond just a crime. People felt like it was an attack on their community, on their sense of safety. The pressure on the police was immense. The media just wouldn't let up, and everyone was demanding justice.
Right.
This huge outcry.
You can totally feel that in the news coverage from back then.
Yeah.
So here's where it gets interesting. Remember that tip I mentioned?
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, the 5 guys who did this, they were caught incredibly quickly. And it was all because one of their girlfriends went to the police. She gave them the information they needed.
It's a reminder that even in these terrible, dark situations, there are people who will do the right thing. And that tiny, seemingly insignificant details can be the key to solving a case, bringing people to justice.
And bringing justice is what happened. The trial was, it was everywhere, all over the news. All 5 of them were found guilty, no question. And they got the harshest sentence possible in Australia. Life in prison, no parole.
And this was a landmark decision. It set a precedent. It really changed how the legal system dealt with violent crimes, especially those against women. It was like a shift, a movement towards tougher punishments for these horrible acts.
And it wasn't just the legal system. The whole country was talking about this. Violence against women, what could be done to prevent these crimes, how to better support victims. It was a national conversation.
Definitely. It forced people to look at some uncomfortable truths. How much violence was actually happening and how the systems meant to protect people were failing, especially those who were vulnerable.
It was a wake-up call for a lot of people. And in the middle of all this, Anita's family, they decided to step forward. They were grieving, of course, but they were also determined. They became these incredible advocates for victims' rights.
It's hard to imagine turning that kind of pain into action, but they did. They campaigned to change parole laws, make sentences tougher for violent offenders, give more support to families going through similar tragedies. It wasn't just about Anita anymore. It was about preventing this from happening to anyone else.
It's inspiring, honestly.
Yeah.
And we can't forget the media and all this. The coverage, it was constant, it was detailed, sometimes it was graphic, and it definitely shaped how the public viewed this whole case and what it meant for Australia.
Yeah, you can argue about whether it went too far sometimes, whether it was too graphic, but it kept the case alive. It kept the pressure on. It made sure the lawmakers, the police, everyone knew this wasn't going away. The public demanded change, and the media kept that pressure on.
It really did. So after going through all this, what can we take away? The Anita Cobby case, it wasn't just a crime. It was a turning point. It exposed problems in society. It made people talk about issues that maybe they didn't want to face before, and it led to real changes.
Real changes in the laws, in the way the justice system worked, in the way people thought about these issues.
Exactly. But it also shows that even in the face of this awful tragedy, there can be hope. You see it in Anita's family, their strength, turning their grief into action. It shows the power of fighting for change, of never giving up, even when it feels impossible.
It's about resilience, about the human capacity to come together and say, we're not going to let this stand. We're going to make things better.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It was a tough one, for sure. But I think it's a story that still matters, a story that reminds us we all have a role to play in fighting for justice, in supporting victims, in creating a safer world.
I agree. Even all these years later, it's a case that stays with you. And it reminds us that we can't be complacent. We always have to keep striving for a better future.
That's a good note to end on. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.